Behind the golden gates of Windsor Castle, where centuries of royal secrets have been carefully guarded, a conversation was about to unfold that would shake the very foundations of the British monarchy. Princess Anne, known for her unwavering loyalty and sharp tongue, had been entrusted with delivering a message so profound, so unexpected, that it would leave Prince William speechless, and King Charles questioning everything he thought he knew about his family's future. What the Queen had whispered to and in her final days wasn't just another royal protocol or ceremonial instruction. It was a revelation about Kate Middleton that would challenge the carefully constructed narrative the palace had spent years building. As Anne prepared to break this earth-shattering news to her nephew and brother, she had no idea that this single conversation would trigger a chain of events that would forever alter the course of the British royal family. The truth, as they say, has a way of surfacing when you least expect it. And on this particular autumn morning, as the mist rolled across the castle grounds, the truth was about to emerge in the most unexpected way possible. The morning sun cast long shadows across the polished marble floors of Windsor Castle as Princess Anne made her way through the familiar corridors. Her footsteps echoed with purpose, each step carrying the weight of the extraordinary message she had been entrusted to deliver. The Princess Royal had always been known for her directness, her ability to cut through royal protocol when necessary, but today felt different. Today, she carried words that would change everything, and paused outside the Oak Room, where she knew her nephew Prince William would be reviewing his morning correspondence. Through the heavy wooden door, she could hear the familiar rustle of papers and the soft clink of a teacup against its saucer. William had always been an early riser, a trait he shared with his grandmother, the late Queen Elizabeth. It was this dedication to duty that had made the Queen's final revelation all the more shocking. Taking a deep breath, Anne knocked firmly on the door. "William, it's Anne. We need to talk." The sounds from within the room stopped abruptly. After a moment, William's voice called out, "Come in, Aunt Anne." Prince William looked up from his desk as Anne entered, his expression shifting from mild curiosity to concern as he registered the gravity in her eyes. At 39, William had learned to read the subtle signs that indicated when royal business was about to become personal business. The way Anne held herself, the slight tension in her jaw, the careful way she closed the door behind her all spoke of something significant. "This is about grandmother, isn't it?" William asked, setting down his fountain pen and giving Anne his full attention, and nodded, moving to the chair across from William's desk. "In her final weeks, your grandmother shared something with me, something she had discovered about Kate. She made me promise to tell you and your father, but only when the time was right." William's face paled slightly. Kate had been through so much recently, and the thought that his grandmother had harbored some secret about his wife sent a chill through him. "What kind of something?" "Before I tell you, you need to understand that your grandmother discovered this quite by accident. She was going through some old documents in the royal archives, personal papers that hadn't been properly catalogued. What she found there changed her entire perspective on Kate's place in this family." The grandfather clock in the corner chimed 9 times, its resonant tones filling the momentary silence. William found himself holding his breath, waiting for and to continue. "Your grandmother found documents dating back to the 1920s. Letters, to be precise. Letters between King George V and a young woman named Catherine Middleton." William's brow furrowed. "But that's impossible. Kate's great-grandmother would have been just a child in the 1920s. There must be some mistake." And shook her head slowly. "That's what your grandmother thought initially. But the more she investigated, the more pieces fell into place. The Catherine Middleton in those letters wasn't Kate's great-grandmother. She was Kate's great-great-grandmother, and she had a relationship with the royal family that was deliberately hidden from history." "What kind of relationship?" "Catherine Middleton was employed as a private secretary to Queen Mary, King George V's wife. But the letters reveal something much more complex. Catherine had been born out of wedlock to a member of the aristocracy who had close ties to the royal family. When she came to work at the palace, she brought with her not just exceptional organizational skills, but also a secret that could have been explosive if it had been revealed at the time." William leaned forward in his chair, completely absorbed by Anne's words. "What secret?" Catherine had been having an affair with a married member of the royal household. Not a royal himself, but someone very close to the family. When she became pregnant, arrangements were made for her to disappear quietly. She was given a substantial sum of money and helped to establish a new life in a different part of England, far from the court. "And this connects to Kate how?" And pulled a folded piece of paper from her jacket pocket. Your grandmother had this DNA analysis done quietly, through private channels. She wanted to be absolutely certain before she told anyone. The results show that Kate carries genetic markers that are consistent with royal bloodlines, but not in the way anyone would have expected. William took the paper with trembling hands, scanning the scientific jargon that meant little to him, but somehow felt monumentally important. Are you saying that Kate has royal blood? Not exactly. What the DNA analysis suggests is that Kate's ancestor, the Catherine Middleton from the 1920s, had a child with someone from the royal household. Someone who themselves carried royal blood, possibly a distant cousin or illegitimate descendant of one of the royal lines. The implications began to sink in for William. If this was true, it meant that his marriage to Kate wasn't just a love story that had captured the world's imagination. It was, in some strange twist of fate, a reunion of bloodlines that had been separated nearly a century ago. Does Kate know any of this? Your grandmother didn't think so. The family records were deliberately obscured, and the Middleton family history, as they know it, begins with more recent generations. But there's more, William. The reason your grandmother felt this was so important is because of what else she found in those archives. And stood and walked to the window, looking out at the gardens where Kate often played with the children. There were other documents, more recent ones. Papers that suggest that Kate's entry into your life wasn't entirely coincidental. William felt a cold sensation spreading through his chest. What do you mean? Your grandmother found correspondence from the 1990s, letters between certain members of the aristocracy and palace officials. There were discussions about eligible young women from good families, women who might be suitable companions for you, and Harry as you came of age. Kate's name appears on several of these lists. That's ridiculous. Kate and I met at university. It was completely natural. Was it? And turned back to face her nephew. Think about it, William. St. Andrews wasn't Kate's first choice for university. She had been accepted to Edinburgh, which was a better match for her intended course of study. But, at the last minute, she switched to St. Andrews, the same university where the future king would be studying. William's mind raced back to those early days at university. He remembered Kate mentioning that she had changed her university choice, but he had never questioned why. It had seemed like one of those minor decisions that young people make without much thought. Your grandmother found records of payments made to certain educational consultants who specialized in helping young women from respectable families navigate the social requirements of elite universities. Kate's family received assistance from one of these consultants. Are you suggesting that Kate was planted in my life? Not planted exactly, but perhaps guided. Your grandmother believed that there were people who recognized Kate's potential value to the royal family, people who helped ensure that she would be in the right place at the right time. William stood abruptly, pacing to the fireplace where portraits of his ancestors gazed down at him with knowing eyes. This is insane. Kate isn't some sort of royal conspiracy. She's my wife, the mother of my children. I love her. Your grandmother never questioned that love, William. But she wanted you to understand that the forces that brought you together might have been more complex than either of you realized. Why are you telling me this now? Why not before? And moved to stand beside her nephew, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. Because your grandmother wanted you to be settled in your role, secure in your marriage, before you learned the truth. She was afraid that if you knew too early, it might poison your relationship with Kate or make you question feelings that were genuine, regardless of how they began. And what about Father? What will he think when he learns about this? That's why we need to speak with Charles together. Your grandmother's final instructions were that both of you should hear this at the same time, so that you could support each other through whatever decisions need to be made. William turned to face and directly. What decisions? What else haven't you told me? And hesitated. And, in that moment of silence, William understood that the revelations were far from over. The documents your grandmother found don't just reveal Kate's hidden connections to the royal family. They also contain information about ongoing activities, people who have been monitoring and influencing royal relationships for decades. Your grandmother believed that there might be individuals who know about Kate's background and have been using that knowledge for their own purposes. What kind of purposes? Political purposes, William. Economic purposes. The kind of purposes that could be used to manipulate or control royal decisions. Your grandmother found evidence that some of the same people involved in Kate's early guidance have connections to media organizations, political groups, and business interests that have benefited significantly from royal endorsements and associations over the years. William felt the room spinning slightly as the full scope of what Anne was telling him began to register. Are you saying that my marriage, my family, has been some kind of political operation. I'm saying that your grandmother believed there were people who saw opportunities in your relationship with Kate and took steps to maximize those opportunities for their own benefit. Whether Kate knows about any of this is unclear, but the evidence suggests that she may have been as much a pawn in this as you were. The sound of children's laughter drifted through the window, and William's heart clenched as he thought about George, Charlotte, and Louis playing in the garden, blissfully unaware that their family's foundation was being shaken to its core. What did grandmother want us to do with this information? She wanted you to be prepared. She believed that eventually, some of this information might become public, either through investigative journalists or through people involved in the original arrangements who might try to use their knowledge for leverage. She wanted you and your father to be ready to handle the situation if that happens. And Kate? Does she deserve to know? And paused, considering the question carefully. Your grandmother felt that was a decision you would need to make together with your father. The revelation could be devastating to Kate, especially if she discovers that aspects of her life have been manipulated without her knowledge. But she also deserves the truth about her own family history. William walked back to his desk and picked up the DNA analysis, studying it again as if the scientific data might somehow provide clearer answers than the human complications surrounding it. There's something else, isn't there? He asked, noting the way and was still hesitating. The current situation with Kate's health, her recent struggles. Your grandmother wondered if the stress of being in a role that she was unconsciously prepared for, but never explicitly chose, might be taking a toll that none of us fully understood. This revelation hit William like a physical blow. Kate's recent difficulties, which they had attributed to the pressures of royal life and media scrutiny, might have deeper roots than anyone had realized. How long do we have before we need to speak with Father? He's expecting us in his study at 11. I've already arranged for the meeting. William looked at his watch. Less than 2 hours to process information that challenged everything he thought he knew about his life, his marriage, and his family's recent history. And, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you believe that Kate loves me? Really loves me, not because she was guided or influenced or prepared, but because she genuinely chose to. Anne's expression softened, and, for the first time since entering the room, she smiled. William, I've watched Kate with you for years. I've seen how she looks at you when she thinks no one is watching. I've seen how she protects your children, how she supports your work, how she fights for your family's privacy and well-being. Whatever forces may have brought you together initially, what exists between you now is real. Your grandmother believed that too. Then, why does this feel like everything is falling apart? Because the truth is complicated, and you're processing it all at once. But your grandmother didn't share this information to destroy your happiness. She shared it to protect it, to make sure you have all the facts you need to defend your family if the time comes. William nodded slowly, feeling some of the panic beginning to subside. What do you think Father will say? I think your father will be angry that this was kept from him for so long, and concerned about the implications for the monarchy. But I also think he'll be relieved to finally understand some things that have never quite made sense. What kind of things? The way certain media outlets have always seemed to have inside information about royal relationships. The way some business deals involving royal endorsements have been unusually profitable for specific groups. The way political pressures around royal activities have sometimes seemed coordinated rather than spontaneous. As Anne spoke, William began to see patterns that he had never noticed before, connections that suddenly seemed less coincidental than they had at the time. The conversation was interrupted by a soft knock on the door. William's private secretary entered quietly. Your Royal Highness, the Princess of Wales is asking if you'll be joining the family for breakfast. The children are asking for you. William looked at and then back at his secretary. Please tell Catherine that I'll be there shortly. We're just finishing up here. As the secretary left, William turned back to Anne. How do I face her right now, knowing what I know? The same way you faced her every day for the past 13 years. With love, with respect, and with the understanding that she's your partner in this life, regardless of how it began. William took a deep breath, straightening his shoulders. And, tonight, I suppose, we'll have to figure out how to tell her. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. For now, let's focus on the conversation with your father. As they prepared to leave the Oak Room, William paused one more time. And, do you think grandmother was right to keep this secret for so long? And considered the question carefully. I think your grandmother did what she thought was best for everyone involved. Whether that was right or wrong, we may never know. But now it's our responsibility to handle the information wisely. And if it becomes public, then we'll face it together as a family. the same way the royal family has faced every crisis for centuries. William nodded, taking one last look at the DNA analysis before folding it carefully and placing it in his jacket pocket. Outside the window, he could see Kate playing with the children, her laughter carrying on the morning breeze. Whatever complicated history had brought them together, whatever forces had influenced their relationship, the love he felt watching her with their children was undeniably real. As he and left the room to prepare for the most difficult conversation of their lives, William made a silent promise to himself that whatever revelations lay ahead, he would protect his family's happiness above all else. The truth might be complicated, but his commitment to Kate and their children was absolutely clear. The walk to King Charles's study felt longer than usual as William and Princess Anne made their way through the castle's ancient corridors. Each step brought them closer to a conversation that would fundamentally alter the royal family's understanding of recent history. William found himself studying the portraits lining the walls, wondering how many other family secrets had been carefully buried beneath layers of official history and royal protocol. Charles was waiting for them in his private study, a room that reflected both his personal interests and the weight of his new role as monarch. Books on architecture and organic farming sat alongside state papers and correspondence from world leaders. The morning light streaming through the tall windows illuminated dust motes that danced in the air like tiny spirits carrying the whispers of generations past. "Father," William said as they entered, noting the tension already visible in Charles's posture. "William and Charles gestured toward the leather chairs arranged in front of his desk, "and told me this morning that we need to discuss something Mother discovered before her death. Something significant." And took the lead, her voice steady and measured. "Charles, what I'm about to tell you will be difficult to process. I need you to listen to everything before you respond." Charles nodded, settling back in his chair with the practiced patience of someone who had spent decades receiving difficult news. "Go ahead." For the next 20 minutes, and carefully recounted everything she had shared with William earlier that morning. She spoke of the hidden documents, the DNA analysis, the evidence of manipulation and influence, and the possibility that Kate's presence in William's life had been more orchestrated than anyone had realized. As Anne spoke, Charles's expression shifted through a range of emotions. Initial skepticism gave way to concern, then to anger, and finally to a kind of grim understanding. When she finished, the study fell silent except for the steady ticking of the antique clock on the mantelpiece. "My God," Charles finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "How long did Mother know about this?" "She began investigating about 6 months before her death. The initial discovery was accidental, but once she started looking deeper, she found more evidence than she had expected." Charles stood and walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. "And she told no one except you?" "She wanted to be absolutely certain of the facts before involving anyone else. And she wanted to choose the right time to reveal the information." "The right time," Charles repeated, a note of bitterness creeping into his voice. "When exactly would have been the right time to learn that my daughter-in-law's entire relationship with my son might have been engineered by unknown parties for unknown purposes?" William spoke up for the first time since they had begun. "Father, I don't think we should jump to conclusions about Kate's motivations. Even if people influenced her path to St. Andrews, that doesn't mean her feelings weren't genuine." Charles turned to face his son. "William, I understand your desire to protect Kate, and I respect it. But we cannot ignore the implications of what Anne is telling us. If there are people who have been manipulating royal relationships for their own gain, then we need to understand who they are and what they want. The documents Mother found suggest that this goes beyond just Kate's situation," and interjected. "There are references to other relationships, other influences that have been at work for years." "What kind of other relationships?" Charles asked, and hesitated before answering. "There are mentions of Harry's relationship with Meghan, suggestions that certain media coverage was coordinated to create specific public reactions. There are also references to business partnerships and charitable endeavorments that the royal family has supported, partnerships that have been unusually profitable for specific individuals and organizations." Charles returned to his chair, his face grave. "Are you telling me that we've been puppets in someone else's game?" "Not puppets exactly, but perhaps not as independent as we believed ourselves to be." William leaned forward in his chair. "What I don't understand is the endgame. If people have been influencing royal relationships and activities, what do they hope to gain?" And pulled out another folder that she had brought with her. Mother found evidence of financial benefits, political influence, and media control. Some of the same individuals connected to Kate's early guidance have profited significantly from royal endorsements, media coverage, and access to royal events. Can you be more specific? Charles asked. There's a pattern of investments and business ventures that have been announced shortly before receiving royal attention or support. Media companies that have gained exclusive access to royal stories and then use that access to influence public opinion on various political and social issues. Charitable organizations that have received royal patronage and then channeled funds to political causes. William felt a growing sense of unease as the scope of the manipulation became clearer. Are you saying that every charitable cause we've supported, every public appearance we've made, has been influenced by these people? Not every one, but more than we would be comfortable with if we had known about the connections at the time. Charles drummed his fingers on the arm of his chair, a gesture William recognized as a sign that his father was thinking through complex problems. What did Mother want us to do with this information? She wanted you to be prepared for the possibility that some of this might become public knowledge. She also wanted you to begin quietly investigating current royal activities to identify any ongoing manipulation or influence. And she wanted us to decide whether Kate should be told about her family history and the possible manipulation of her early relationship with William. The mention of Kate brought a fresh wave of concern to William's face. I keep coming back to that question. Does she have a right to know, even if it might be devastating for her? There's another consideration, and said quietly. If Kate doesn't know about her family history or the possible manipulation, she might be vulnerable to blackmail or manipulation by the same people who orchestrated her initial connection to William. This possibility had not occurred to either William or Charles, and its implications were chilling. You think someone might try to use this information against us? William asked. Your grandmother thought it was possible. If these people have maintained their influence for this long, they must have contingency plans for protecting their interests if their activities are discovered. Charles stood again, this time moving to a filing cabinet in the corner of the room. He withdrew a thick folder and returned to his chair. I need to share something with both of you. Over the past few months, since becoming king, I've received several unusual requests for meetings with individuals I don't know, people who claim to have important information about royal family matters. I had my staff decline these meetings, but now I'm wondering if I should have paid more attention. What kind of people? And asked. Business leaders, media executives, political advisors. People with impressive credentials, but no obvious reason to seek private audiences with the monarch. They all mentioned having information that would be valuable to the royal family's future security and prosperity. William and exchanged glances. This sounded exactly like the kind of approach that people with hidden knowledge might make. Do you still have their contact information? William asked. My staff keeps records of all requests for meetings, even those that are declined. Charles opened the folder and began reviewing the documents inside. Here's one from a woman named Margaret Worthington, who describes herself as a strategic advisor to high-profile families. She specifically mentioned having information about recent developments in royal family relationships that could be important for long-term planning. That sounds suspiciously like someone who might know about the Kate situation, and observed. Charles continued reading. And here's a request from someone named David Harrison, who claims to represent a group of investors with long-term interests in the stability and prosperity of the British monarchy. He wanted to discuss ways to protect royal family interests in an increasingly complex media and political environment. These could be legitimate business people, William suggested, though his tone indicated he didn't entirely believe it himself. Or they could be the very people Mother was concerned about, and countered. People who have been operating behind the scenes and who now want to make contact directly, possibly because they're concerned that their activities might be discovered. Charles set down the folder and looked at his son and sister. I think we need to make some decisions quickly. First, do we investigate these meeting requests more thoroughly? Second, do we tell Kate what we've learned? And third, how do we protect ourselves and the institution of the monarchy from whatever threat these people might represent? William had been dreading this moment, but he knew it was inevitable. I think Kate has to be told. She's my wife and the future queen consort. She has a right to know about her own family history, and she needs to be aware of any potential threats to our family. I agree, and said, but we need to think carefully about how and when we tell her. What about the investigation? Charles asked. Do we involve the security services, or do we try to handle this privately? I think we need professional help, William replied. If these people have been operating for decades, they're sophisticated and well-connected. We need experts who can investigate without alerting them to what we've discovered. And nodded. Your grandmother included the name of a private investigator in her files, someone she had consulted during her own investigation. Someone with experience in sensitive matters involving high-profile families. All right, Charles said, standing once again. Here's what we'll do. And contact your grandmother's investigator and arrange for a private meeting. William, you'll need to tell Kate, but wait until we have more information from the investigation. I'll have my staff arrange a discreet meeting with one of these people who have been requesting appointments, but only after we've learned more about who they are. How long do you think we have before this becomes urgent? William asked. That depends on what these people want and how patient they are, Charles replied. But I have a feeling that becoming king has changed the dynamic somehow. They may feel more pressure to make direct contact now that the monarchy has transitioned to a new generation. As if summoned by their conversation about urgency, Charles's private secretary knocked on the door. Your Majesty, I apologize for the interruption, but there's been a development that you need to know about immediately. Charles gestured for the secretary to enter. What is it, James? Sir, we've received a call from the editor of a major newspaper. They're planning to run a story tomorrow about allegations of manipulation and influence involving royal family relationships. They're asking for official comment. The blood drained from William's face. What kind of allegations? The editor wouldn't provide specific details over the phone, but he mentioned having documents that suggest certain royal relationships may not have developed as naturally as the public believes. And William exchanged glances. Their worst fears were apparently coming true faster than anyone had expected. Did the editor indicate how they obtained this information? Charles asked. He said they had received the documents from a confidential source who claims to have extensive knowledge of royal family affairs spanning several decades. Charles dismissed his secretary with instructions to delay any response until later in the day, then turned back to William and Anne. It appears we no longer have the luxury of time, he said grimly. Someone has decided to force our hand. William felt the room spinning slightly as the implications sank in. Kate is supposed to have lunch with friends this afternoon, and then she's picking up the children from school. How do I tell her that our entire relationship might be front-page news tomorrow? You tell her the truth, and said firmly. You tell her that regardless of how your relationship began, you love her and you're committed to protecting your family. But what if she feels like her entire life has been a lie? What if she can't handle learning that people may have manipulated her into our relationship? Charles moved to stand beside his son, placing a hand on William's shoulder. Then, we'll deal with that together, as a family. But Kate is stronger than you think, and she's been dealing with royal pressures for years. She'll find a way through this. What about the children? William asked. If this story comes out, how do we protect them from the media attention? We have protocols for protecting the children during media crises, Charles replied. But we need to act quickly to implement them. And stood and gathered her papers. I'll contact the investigator immediately and see if we can get an emergency meeting this afternoon. We need to understand what we're dealing with before we can figure out how to respond. And I'll have my staff arrange for a meeting with one of these people who have been requesting appointments, Charles added. If they're behind this newspaper story, we need to understand what they want. William looked at his watch. It was almost noon, and Kate would be expecting him for lunch. I should go talk to Kate now, before she hears about this from someone else. Are you sure you're ready for that conversation? Anne asked. I don't think anyone could ever be ready for this conversation, William replied. But it has to happen, and it's better coming from me than from a newspaper. As they prepared to leave Charles's study, the king stopped his son once more. William, remember that whatever happens with this story, whatever we learn about how your relationship with Kate began, the love you share, and the family you've built together is real. Don't let anyone take that away from you. William nodded, but as he walked back through the castle corridors toward his own apartments, he couldn't shake the feeling that everything he had believed about his life was about to change forever. The sound of his children's laughter from the garden provided a stark contrast to the gravity of the situation, reminding him of everything he had to lose if this crisis wasn't handled carefully. In just a few hours, he would need to sit down with Kate and explain that their fairy tale romance might have been something much more complicated than either of them had realized. The thought of seeing confusion and hurt in her eyes was almost unbearable, but he knew that honesty was the only way forward. As he reached his private apartments, William took a deep breath and prepared to have the most difficult conversation of his marriage. Kate was arranging flowers in the drawing room when William found her, her movements graceful and practiced as she worked with the white roses that had been delivered that morning. The afternoon light streaming through the tall windows caught the highlights in her hair, creating an almost ethereal glow around her figure. For a moment, William stood in the doorway, memorizing this peaceful scene before he shattered it with revelations that would change everything. "Those look beautiful," he said softly, stepping into the room. Kate looked up with a smile that made his heart ache. "I thought we could use some brightness in here. The children will be home soon, and you know how Charlotte loves the white roses. Kate, we need to talk." The seriousness in his tone caused her to pause, her hand still holding a single rose stem. "Is everything all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." William moved to close the drawing room door, a gesture that immediately put Kate on alert. In their years of marriage, he rarely closed doors during casual conversations unless the matter was extremely private or concerning. "Please, sit down," he said, gesturing toward the sofa where they had shared countless quiet moments over the years. Kate set down the rose and moved to the sofa, her expression growing more concerned with each passing second. "William, you're scaring me. What's happened?" William sat beside her, taking her hands in his. They felt cold despite the warmth of the afternoon, and he could feel a slight tremor in her fingers. "This morning, and came to see me. She had something to tell me that grandmother had discovered before she died, something about your family history." Kate's brow furrowed. "My family history? What could your grandmother have discovered about my family that would require such a serious conversation?" "Kate, what I'm about to tell you is going to be difficult to understand, and it might be upsetting. But I need you to know that regardless of what we learn about the past, nothing changes how I feel about you or our family. Just tell me, William. Whatever it is, we can handle it together." William took a deep breath and began to recount the discoveries that and had shared with him. He spoke carefully, watching Kate's face as he explained about the documents from the 1920s, the DNA analysis, and the evidence that her path to St. Andrews might not have been as coincidental as they had always believed. As he spoke, Kate's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief to something that looked like a deep, growing hurt. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment, her hands having pulled away from his to clasp tightly in her lap. "So you're telling me," she said finally, her voice carefully controlled, "that our entire relationship, our marriage, our children, might all be the result of some elaborate manipulation by people we don't even know?" "That's not what I'm saying," William replied quickly. "What I'm saying is that the way we met might have been influenced by others, but everything that happened after that, everything we built together, that's real." Kate stood and walked to the window, her back to William. "How can you be so sure? If people were sophisticated enough to orchestrate our meeting, how do we know they haven't been influencing things all along?" "Because I know you, Kate. I know your heart, your character, your love for our children. That can't be fabricated, can't it?" She turned to face him, and William was startled to see tears in her eyes. "How do I know what's real anymore? How do I know if my feelings are my own, or if they were somehow programmed into me?" "Kate, that's impossible. No one can control how someone feels. But they can control circumstances. They can create situations that encourage certain feelings. They can manipulate events to push people together." Her voice was rising slightly, the carefully maintained royal composure beginning to crack. William stood and moved toward her, but she held up a hand to stop him. "I need to think about this. I need to process what you're telling me." "There's more," William said reluctantly, "and believes that these people, whoever they are, might still be active. There's a possibility that they could try to use this information to manipulate or blackmail us." Kate's face went pale. "And there's something else, isn't there? Something you haven't told me yet." William nodded, hating himself for having to continue. "A newspaper is planning to run a story tomorrow. They claim to have documents about royal relationship manipulation. We don't know how much they know, but we need to be prepared for the story to become public." Kate sank into a chair, her hands covering her face. "Oh God, the children. What will this do to the children?" "We'll protect them," William said firmly. "Whatever happens, we'll make sure they're shielded from as much of this as possible." "How? How do you shield children from learning that their parents' marriage might be a lie?" "Because it's not a lie," William said, kneeling in front of her chair and gently taking her hands away from her face. "Kate, look at me. What we have is real. The way you make me laugh, the way you comfort me when I'm worried about royal duties, the way you are with George and Charlotte and Louis, that's not manipulation. That's love." Kate looked into his eyes, searching for reassurance. "But how do we know where the manipulation ends the real relationship begins. What if I only think I love you because I was conditioned to think that? Because love isn't just a feeling, Kate. It's a choice, and it's actions. And every day for the past 13 years, you've chosen to love our family, to support my work, to be a partner in this impossible life we lead. No one could have programmed that level of commitment and authenticity. But what if? Kate began, but was interrupted by a knock on the door. William's private secretary entered with an apologetic expression. I'm sorry to interrupt, Your Royal Highnesses, but there's been another development. The newspaper editor called back. They're moving the story up to tonight's late edition. It will be online within hours. Kate and William exchanged glances. Their private crisis was about to become very public. What exactly are they claiming? Kate asked, her voice steady despite the circumstances. They're alleging that certain royal marriages were arranged by a network of influential individuals for political and financial gain. They specifically mention evidence related to Your Royal Highness's relationship with Prince William. Do they have photographs? Documents? William asked. They claim to have letters and financial records spanning several decades. They also say they have testimony from someone who was involved in the original arrangements. After the secretary left, Kate and William sat in stunned silence for several minutes. I need to call my parents, Kate said finally. If this story is coming out, they need to be prepared. They don't deserve to be ambushed by reporters. Of course. And I need to meet with Father and to discuss our response. Kate stood and smoothed her skirt, her royal training taking over even in the midst of personal crisis. What do we tell the children when they ask why there are more photographers than usual outside the school? We tell them that there are some stories in the newspapers that aren't true, and that we're working to correct them. We tell them that we love them, and that nothing will change about our family. And if they ask what the stories are about, William considered this. At ages 8, 6, and 3, the children were still young enough to be shielded from most of the details. But George was becoming increasingly aware of his family's public role. We tell them age-appropriate truth, that some people are saying untrue things about how Mummy and Daddy met, but that the love in our family is real and strong. Kate nodded, then moved toward the door. As she reached it, she turned back to William. I need you to know that whatever happens with this story, whatever we find out about how our relationship began, I don't regret any of it. Our children, our life together, even the difficult parts of being in this family, I wouldn't change any of it. Kate, but I also need you to know that I need time to process all of this. The idea that people I don't know might have been manipulating my life, that decisions I thought were mine might not have been, that's going to take time to work through. I understand. Do you? Because I feel like I'm learning that everything I believed about myself, about my choices, about my life, might not be true. That's not something you get over in an afternoon. William wanted to comfort her, to promise that everything would be fine, but he could see in her eyes that what she needed most was honesty. You're right. This is enormous, and it's going to take time to understand all the implications. But, Kate, please don't doubt that you are loved, truly loved, by me and by our children. Whatever brought us together initially, what we've built since then, is entirely our own. Kate's expression softened slightly. I love you too, William. That's what makes this so frightening. The thought that even my love might not be entirely my own. Your love is your own, William said firmly. I've watched you love our children from the moment they were born. I've seen you fight for this family's privacy and happiness. I've seen you sacrifice your own comfort for the good of the monarchy and the people we serve. That kind of love can't be manufactured or manipulated. Kate wiped away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. What happens next? Next, we face this together. We talk to the children. We deal with the media attention, and we figure out who these people are who have been involved in our lives without our knowledge. And we find out the truth about everything. Yes, all of it, whatever the cost. Kate took a deep breath and squared her shoulders, and William recognized the determined expression that he had seen countless times when she was preparing to face a difficult public engagement or family challenge. Then, let's begin. As they left the drawing room together, William felt a mixture of pride and concern. Pride in Kate's strength and grace under impossible circumstances, and concern about what the coming hours and days would bring. The white roses she had been arranging sat abandoned on the side table, their beauty a stark contrast to the storm that was about to engulf their family. The sound of car doors slamming outside indicated that the media attention was already beginning to intensify. Soon, the carefully protected privacy of their family life would be shattered, and they would need to navigate this crisis while maintaining their roles as parents, public figures, and partners in marriage. William's phone buzzed with a text from, and meeting with investigator arranged for 6 p.m. Father meeting with one of the mysterious contacts at 7 p.m. Are you and Kate ready for this? He showed the message to Kate, who read it and nodded grimly. As ready as anyone can be for their life to be turned upside down, she replied. Kate, one more thing. If at any point this becomes too much, if you need to step back from public duties while we sort this out, we can arrange that. No, she said firmly. If people have been manipulating our relationship for their own purposes, if they think they can control or influence the royal family, then they need to see that we won't be intimidated. We'll face this head on, even if the story makes things very difficult for a while. Especially then. Our children need to see that when people try to hurt our family, we don't hide. We face the truth, and we protect each other. As they walked through the castle corridors toward the children's wing, where George, Charlotte, and Louis would soon return from school, William felt a renewed sense of determination. Whatever conspiracy had been operating behind the scenes, whatever manipulation had influenced their early relationship, he was more certain than ever that the family they had built together was worth fighting for. The real battle was just beginning. The private investigator that Princess Anne had contacted arrived at Windsor Castle as the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the ancient stones. Margaret Stevenson was not what William had expected. Rather than the stereotypical image of a detective, she appeared to be an elegant woman in her 50s, with silver hair and the kind of understated confidence that suggested extensive experience dealing with high-profile, sensitive situations, and led William and Kate to a secure meeting room that was regularly swept for surveillance devices. The gravity of their situation was underscored by the security precautions that were now necessary even within the walls of their own home. Ms. Stevenson, and began, "Thank you for coming on such short notice. As I explained on the phone, we have a situation that requires immediate attention and absolute discretion." Margaret Stevenson opened a leather portfolio and withdrew several documents. "Princess Anne, Your Royal Highnesses, I've been investigating matters related to your family for some time, initially at the request of the late Queen. What you've discovered is just the beginning of a much larger operation." Kate leaned forward in her chair. "What kind of operation?" "A sophisticated network of individuals and organizations that have been influencing royal relationships and activities for financial and political gain. Your situation, Your Royal Highness," she addressed Kate directly, "is part of a pattern that extends back several decades." William felt his stomach drop. How extensive is this network? Extensive enough to have connections in media organizations, political parties, charitable foundations, and business enterprises across the United Kingdom and internationally. They've been operating by identifying individuals with the potential to influence royal family members and then creating opportunities for those relationships to develop. "Are you saying that Kate isn't the only one?" William asked. "I'm saying that your wife's situation is the most successful example of their work, but there have been others. Some relationships that were encouraged but never developed significantly, others that were actively discouraged when they were seen as potentially problematic for the network's interests." Kate's face had gone pale. "How do you know all this?" "Because 18 months ago, I was approached by someone claiming to represent this network. They wanted to hire me to investigate potential romantic interests for Prince Harry, to identify individuals who could be guided into his social circle." "Did you accept?" Anne asked. "I pretended to accept while actually investigating them. What I found was deeply concerning. This network has been operating for decades, influencing not just royal relationships, but also business partnerships, media coverage, and even political decisions that affect the monarchy." Margaret opened another folder and spread several photographs across the table. "These are some of the key players: financial advisors, media executives, political consultants, and what they call social facilitators, people whose job it is to create circumstances that encourage specific relationships to develop." William studied the photographs, not recognizing any of the faces but noting their obvious wealth and influence from their clothing and settings. "Do any of these people look familiar to you?" Margaret asked Kate. Kate examined each photograph carefully, her brow furrowed in concentration. "This woman," she said, pointing to a photograph of an elegant brunette in her 40s. "I think I've seen her before, but I can't place where." "That's Victoria Pemberton. She's a social consultant who specializes in helping young women from good families navigate elite social circles. According to my investigation, She had several meetings with your mother during your final year of secondary school. Kate's hand went to her throat. My mother never mentioned meeting with anyone like that. The meetings were presented as career guidance sessions. Ms. Pemberton has a legitimate business helping young women prepare for university and career opportunities. What makes her activities suspicious is the pattern of her clients. A disproportionate number of them have ended up in relationships with high-profile individuals. Including me, Kate said quietly. Including you. But also the current wives of several prominent politicians, the girlfriend of a major media owner, and the fiancée of one of Britain's wealthiest businessmen. William was struggling to process the implications. Are you saying that all of these relationships were arranged? Not arranged exactly. More like facilitated. The network identifies individuals with the right backgrounds, personalities, and potential, then creates circumstances that make it more likely for them to meet and develop relationships with their targets. But why? Kate asked. What do they gain from manipulating these relationships? Margaret withdrew another set of documents. Financial gain, primarily, but also political influence and media control. Let me give you some specific examples related to your own relationship. She spread out financial records and business documents. In the 5 years following your engagement to Prince William, companies connected to this network received royal warrants worth over £50 million. Media organizations in the network gained exclusive access to royal stories that generated hundreds of millions in advertising revenue. Political causes supported by the network received high-profile royal endorsements that influenced public opinion and policy decisions. Kate stood abruptly and walked to the window, her back to the others. So my marriage has been a business transaction all along. Your marriage is real, Margaret said firmly. What this network did was create opportunities and remove obstacles. They couldn't manufacture love or compatibility. What you and Prince William built together is genuine, regardless of how it began. But they profited from it, Kate said without turning around. Yes, they profited substantially. And they've been protecting their investment by monitoring your relationship and occasionally influencing circumstances to ensure its stability and success. William felt a chill run down his spine. What kind of monitoring? Media coverage, primarily. Ensuring that negative stories about your relationship were suppressed while positive stories were promoted. Arranging for supportive commentary during difficult periods. Making sure that potential threats to your relationship were neutralized. Threats? And asked. Other women who might have been romantic interests for Prince William were often subject to sudden negative media attention that damaged their reputations or created personal problems that made them withdraw from royal social circles. William thought back over the years before his marriage to Kate, remembering several women he had dated casually who had suddenly faced unexpected personal or professional difficulties. At the time, he had attributed these situations to the pressures of dating someone in his position, but now he wondered if there had been more deliberate interference. What about Harry? William asked. You mentioned that they tried to hire you to find someone for Harry. That's where things get complicated, Margaret replied. Harry's relationship with Meghan was not part of their plan. In fact, it was actively opposed by the network because Meghan's background and independence made her unsuitable for their purposes. So they tried to break them up? And asked. They tried, but Harry and Meghan's relationship was strong enough to survive the interference. When it became clear that they couldn't be separated, the network shifted strategies and began using their relationship for different purposes. What kind of purposes? Creating drama and conflict that could be used to distract from other royal family activities, generating media content that could be monetized, and eventually facilitating their departure from the royal family in a way that actually benefited certain media and business interests. Kate turned back to face the group, her expression grim. Are you saying that Harry and Meghan's problems with the royal family were manufactured by these people? I'm saying that many of the conflicts were amplified and exploited by people with financial interests in creating royal family drama. The underlying tensions may have been real, but they were deliberately intensified to serve the network's purposes. William felt sick. The thought that his brother's pain and eventual estrangement from the family might have been deliberately orchestrated was almost unbearable. What do they want now, he asked. If they've been operating successfully for years, why are newspaper stories coming out? Why is their secrecy being compromised? Margaret's expression became even more serious. Because King Charles becoming monarch has disrupted their operations. They had established relationships and influence patterns with Queen Elizabeth's court, but Charles has different advisors, different priorities, different approaches to royal activities. They're losing their insider access and their ability to influence royal decisions. So they're trying to regain control? And asked, they're trying to demonstrate their power and importance. The newspaper story that's about to be published isn't an exposé by investigative journalists. It's a carefully orchestrated revelation by the network themselves, designed to show the royal family how vulnerable they are and how much they need the network's protection and cooperation. Protection from what? Kate asked. From the complete truth coming out. What's being published tonight is just a small portion of what they know. They have detailed records of their activities, financial documents showing exactly who profited from royal relationships, and evidence of specific interventions they made to influence royal family decisions over the years. William stood and began pacing the room. So this is blackmail. Sophisticated blackmail. They're not asking for money directly. They want to be brought back into the inner circle of royal decision-making. They want King Charles to consult with them on major royal family activities, to give them advance notice of important announcements, and to ensure that their business interests continue to receive royal support. And if we refuse? Kate asked. They'll release more information. Information that could be devastating not just to your relationship, but to the reputation of the monarchy itself. They have evidence of financial improprieties, political manipulations, and personal interventions that go far beyond romantic relationships. The room fell silent as the full scope of the threat became clear. They were dealing with people who had been operating at the highest levels of British society for decades, people with the resources and connections to cause serious damage to the royal family's reputation and effectiveness. What do you recommend? And asked. Margaret gathered her documents back into neat piles. You have 3 options. First, you can attempt to negotiate with them, giving them some of what they want in exchange for their continued discretion. Second, you can go public yourselves, controlling the narrative by revealing the full truth before they can use it against you. Third, you can fight them directly, using the resources of the British government and intelligence services to investigate and potentially prosecute their activities. What are the risks of each approach? William asked. Negotiation keeps them in your lives permanently and validates their methods. Going public completely could cause significant damage to public confidence in the monarchy. Fighting them directly could result in a prolonged battle with uncertain outcomes and significant collateral damage. Kate returned to her chair, her expression thoughtful. Is there a fourth option? What if we expose their activities, but not the specific details about our relationship? What if we focused on their business and political manipulations rather than the personal aspects? Margaret considered this. That's possible, but it would require very careful coordination with media allies and government officials. And it would still carry risks. And checked her watch. King Charles should be finishing his meeting with one of their representatives right about now. Depending on how that goes, we may have a better sense of what they're specifically demanding. As if summoned by her words, William's phone buzzed with a text from his father. Meeting complete. Emergency family conference at 8 p.m. Bring Kate and N. William showed the message to the others. Margaret began packing her materials. I'll continue investigating and prepare detailed reports on each of the options we discussed, she said. But you should know that time is not on your side. The longer this network operates, the more leverage they gain. As Margaret left, William, Kate, and sat in contemplative silence. How are you feeling? William asked Kate. Angry, she replied without hesitation. Angry that people have been treating my life like a chess game. Angry that they've profited from my marriage and my children. And angry that they think they can continue to manipulate us. What do you want to do? Kate's expression was determined. I want to fight them. Whatever the cost, whatever the risks, I want these people to understand that they cannot control the royal family. William felt a surge of admiration for his wife's courage, but also concern about the battles that lay ahead. Are you sure? This could get very messy, very public, and very painful for all of us. I'm sure. Our children deserve to grow up knowing that their parents fought for the truth and for the right to control their own lives. I won't let these people continue to profit from our family. As they prepared to join Charles for what would undoubtedly be another difficult conversation, William realized that his wife's strength and determination in the face of this crisis had only deepened his love and respect for her. Whatever manipulation might have brought them together initially, what was emerging from this trial was proof of the genuine partnership they had built together. King Charles was visibly shaken when William, Kate, and entered his study at 8 o'clock that evening. The meeting with the network's representative had clearly been more disturbing than anticipated, and the gravity of their situation was written across his features. "How did it go, Father?" William asked as they settled into their chairs. Charles poured himself a brandy with hands that trembled slightly. "It was perhaps one of the most unsettling conversations of my life. The man I met with, someone named Robert Fitzgerald, spoke as if he had been a silent partner in royal family decisions for decades." "What did he want?" Kate asked directly. He presented it as offering continued guidance and support for the royal family during what he called challenging transitions. But what he was actually describing was a system where major royal family decisions would be coordinated through his network before being implemented. And leaned forward. Did he make specific threats? He didn't need to. He spent 30 minutes demonstrating his detailed knowledge of royal family activities, financial arrangements, and personal relationships spanning the past 20 years. He knew things that should have been impossible for any outsider to know. "What kinds of things?" William asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to hear the answer. Charles set down his brandy and opened a folder on his desk. He knew about private medical consultations, financial investments, personal correspondence with world leaders, and confidential discussions about royal family members' roles and responsibilities. He even knew about arguments between family members that took place in private. Kate felt a chill run through her. How is that possible? He indicated that his network has had people placed within royal household staff, security services, and advisory positions for years. Not necessarily as deliberate spies, but as individuals whose loyalties were divided and who provided information in exchange for career advancement or financial benefits. The implications were staggering. If this network had infiltrated the royal household at multiple levels, then virtually nothing about their private lives had been truly private. "Did he say what would happen if we don't cooperate?" and asked. He was very subtle about it, but the message was clear. He mentioned that public revelations about royal family activities could be managed to minimize damage if there was proper coordination, but that uncontrolled revelations could be devastating for the monarchy's reputation and effectiveness. William stood and walked to the window, looking out at the darkened grounds where security lights illuminated the perimeter. "So we're being held hostage by people who have been spying on us for years." "It appears so," Charles replied grimly. Kate had been quiet during this exchange, but now she spoke with a determination that surprised them all. "I've been thinking about what Margaret Stevenson told us about our options, and I believe there's something we're not considering." "What's that?" Charles asked. "We're thinking about this as if we're the only victims, but we're not. Margaret mentioned that this network has manipulated relationships and activities involving politicians, business leaders, and media figures. There must be others who would want to see this network exposed and dismantled." "That's an interesting point," and said thoughtfully. "If we could identify other victims and coordinate with them, we might have more leverage than we realize." William turned back to the group. "But that would require going public with at least some of this information, wouldn't it?" "Not necessarily," Kate replied. "Margaret could approach other potential victims discreetly. We could build a coalition before making anything public." Charles considered this proposal. "It's risky, but it might be our best option. The alternative is either submitting to blackmail or facing their retaliation alone." "There's something else we need to consider," Williams said. "If we're going to fight this network, we need to ensure that our children are protected from any fallout. George is old enough to understand some of what's happening, and all three of them will be affected by increased media attention." "I've already spoken with the children's security detail," Charles replied. "We're implementing enhanced protection protocols, and their school has been briefed on potential media pressure." Kate's phone buzzed with a notification. She glanced at it, and her face went pale. The story is online. It's the lead story on the newspaper's website. William moved to sit beside her as she opened the article on her phone. The headline was deliberately sensational. "Royal Marriage Exposed. Secret Network Arranged Princess Catherine's Relationship with Prince William." As they read through the article together, it became clear that the network had been strategic about what they revealed. The story contained enough specific details to be credible, but stopped short of providing the most damaging information. It was a warning shot, designed to demonstrate their power while leaving room for negotiation. "Look at the comments," and said, reading over their shoulders. "The public reaction is mixed, but there's significant support for you both." Indeed, while some comments expressed shock and disappointment, many others defended William and Kate, arguing that their love and commitment to each other and their children was obvious regardless of how their relationship began. The network may have miscalculated, Charles observed. They assumed this revelation would damage our reputation significantly, but it might actually generate public sympathy. That could work to our advantage, Kate said. If we can get ahead of the narrative and control how the full story is told, we might be able to turn this situation around. William's phone began ringing immediately. He glanced at the caller ID and saw it was his private secretary. "Sir," came the voice on the other end. "We've had over 200 media requests in the past hour. How would you like to respond?" "Schedule a press conference for tomorrow morning," William replied after glancing at Kate and Charles. "We'll make a statement then." "Are you sure that's wise?" and asked after he hung up. "We can't let them control the narrative," Kate replied. "If we're going to fight this, we need to be proactive, not reactive." Charles nodded slowly. "What will you say?" "The truth," William answered. "That we've recently learned about attempts to manipulate royal relationships for financial and political gain, that we're investigating these activities, and that we're committed to ensuring they never happen again." "And about your relationship specifically?" Kate took William's hand. "We'll say that while we've learned that some people may have tried to influence how we met, our love, our marriage, and our commitment to each other and our children is entirely genuine and unshakable." "That's good," Charles said. "It acknowledges the concerns without validating the network's claims about controlling your relationship." And checked her watch. "Margaret should have preliminary reports ready by morning. If we're going to expose this network publicly, we'll need detailed evidence to support our claims." "What about the meeting requests from other network members?" William asked. "I think we should accept one or two of them," Charles replied. "If we're going public anyway, it might be valuable to have direct evidence of their attempts to pressure or influence us." "That's dangerous," Kate said. "If they realize we're investigating them, they might accelerate their timeline for releasing more damaging information." "It's a calculated risk," Charles agreed. "But if we're going to war with these people, we need ammunition." As they continued planning their response strategy, William found himself marveling at the transformation in Kate. The woman who had been devastated and uncertain just hours earlier was now displaying the kind of strategic thinking and determination that would be essential in the battles ahead. "There's one more thing we need to discuss," Kate said as they prepared to conclude their meeting. "Our personal relationship. How do we move forward knowing what we know?" William looked into her eyes, seeing both vulnerability and strength there. "We move forward by remembering why we fell in love in the first place, and by being honest about what this experience has taught us about each other." "And what has it taught you?" "It's taught me that you're even stronger and more remarkable than I realized. The way you've handled this crisis, the way you've thought strategically about protecting our family while fighting for the truth, it's made me love you more, not less." Kate's eyes filled with tears. "It's taught me that our love can survive anything, even learning that it might have been manipulated from the beginning. What we have now is entirely our choice, entirely real." Charles cleared his throat gently. "I think this crisis may ultimately strengthen your relationship and your effectiveness as future monarchs. You're learning to work together under extreme pressure, and you're developing skills that will serve the monarchy well in the future." "What about the immediate future?" and asked. "Tomorrow's press conference is just the beginning. This investigation and potential legal action could take months or years. Then, we'll face it one day at a time," William replied. "But we'll face it together as a family." As they left Charles's study, William and Kate walked hand in hand through the castle corridors. The crisis was far from over, and the coming weeks would undoubtedly bring new challenges and revelations. But for the first time since learning about the network's manipulation, William felt optimistic about their ability to emerge stronger from this trial. "Do you regret anything?" Kate asked as they reached their private apartments. "I regret that people tried to manipulate us, and I regret that they profited from our relationship without our knowledge. But I don't regret a single moment of our life together. Even if you learn that more aspects of our relationship were influenced than we currently realize. Even then, because whatever brought us together, we chose to stay together. We chose to build a family, to support each other through public pressures and private challenges, to love each other through good times and difficult times. Those were our choices, and they're what matter." Kate stopped and turned to face him fully. "William, I need you to know that fighting this network, exposing what they've done, it might get very ugly. There might be revelations about both of us that are embarrassing or painful. Are you having second thoughts about confronting them?" "No, but I want to make sure you understand what we might be facing. These people have been operating at the highest levels for decades. They likely have information that could damage not just us, but other members of the royal family as well. William considered this soberly. Are you saying we should warn Harry and Meghan? I'm saying we should consider all the potential ramifications before we proceed. Once we declare war on this network, there's no going back. Kate, 3 hours ago you were ready to fight them regardless of the cost. What's changed? Nothing's changed about my determination to stop them. But now that I've had time to think about the specifics, I realize that our decision affects more than just us. It affects our children, our extended family, and potentially the future of the monarchy itself. William pulled her close, holding her tightly. Whatever we decide together. And whatever consequences we face together. Then, let's do this. Let's expose them, fight them, and make sure they never manipulate another royal family again. As they entered their private apartments, where their 3 children were sleeping peacefully, unaware of the storm swirling around their family, William felt a profound sense of purpose. The battle ahead would be difficult, but it was a battle worth fighting for the sake of truth, integrity, and the right of his family to control their own destiny. The network that had operated in shadows for decades was about to face the full light of public scrutiny, and William was confident that when the truth was finally revealed, it would set his family free from manipulation forever. Tomorrow would mark the beginning of the most challenging period of their public lives, but it would also mark the beginning of their liberation from forces that had sought to control them without their knowledge or consent. For the first time in their marriage, William and Kate were truly free to choose their own path, and they were choosing to face the future together with courage, honesty, and unwavering love.